everyone, this is Showtime 112. May the 1st, 1982 was the day when British operations against Argentine forces on the Falkland Islands, or Islas Malvinas, began. The British attacked the Port Stanley and Goose Green airfields with their Sea Harriers and one Vulcan bomber, to which the Argentinians responded by sending their Mirage III and Dagger fighters over the islands. In the morning and early afternoon, several near engagements between the Argentine fighters and British Sea Harriers took place, but none of them resulted in any shootdowns. In a previous video, we described those engagements, but we also compared the fighter types flown by two sides and their weapons. Watch the video if you missed it. In the afternoon, 3 British warships approached Port Stanley with the objective of airfield bombardment. The ships were one destroyer, HMS Glamorgan, and 2 frigates, Alacrity and Arrow. At 2:45 p.m., they arrived to about 9 nautical miles offshore and began shelling the airfield that Argentinians called BAM Malvinas. "45 minutes later, the Argentine radar detected what was believed to be 5 landing crafts to the east. Along with reports of helicopter landings, the Argentine leadership was convinced that an amphibious assault would follow, and a maximum effort airstrike was ordered. To this task, the Air Force allocated 12 A-4 Skyhawks from Fighter Groups 4 and 5, 3 Daggers from Group 6, and 6 Canberra bombers from Bomber Group No. 2. These strikers were to be escorted by 2 pairs of Mirages sweeping ahead of them and 4 Daggers which were to cover the egress. The first Mirage flight, the Dardo section, took off from Rio Gallegos at 3:45 p.m. Those 2 Mirages were flown by Capitán García Cuerva and Teniente Carlos Perona. Those 2 pilots had already flown a mission in the morning and they tried to engage 2 Sea Harriers, but eventually they disengaged due to low fuel state. Also, at 3:45 p.m., a flight of 3 Daggers, each armed with 2 parachute-retarded bombs, took off from San Julian Air Base. Their fighter escort, consisting of 2 more Daggers, followed them 15 minutes later. Finally, a single Dagger with the call sign Rubio 2 took off from Rio Grande Air Base at 3:54 p.m. It was flown by Teniente José Ardiles. Rubio 1 aborted before takeoff because of a technical issue. The Dardo flight of García Cuerva and Perona led the fighter sweep, arriving over the islands at 4:25 p.m. at 35,000 feet of altitude. They were then directed by ground radar to intercept the northern combat air patrol of Sea Harriers. The radar controller decided to separate the 2 Mirages, so they turned 45 degrees to each side of their heading. They then decided to jettison their fuel tanks. But the wingman, Carlos Perona, had a problem. Only his left tank dropped, while the right one remained under the wing. This was a serious handicap in any dogfight. The radar operator then told the Mirage flight that their target was 30 miles ahead and below them. The Mirages started a gentle dive. The Sea Harrier Combat Air Patrol was flown by Flight Lieutenant Paul Barton, an RAF officer on an exchange tour, and Royal Navy Lieutenant Steve Thomas. They were directed by HMS Glamorgan towards the 2 bogies at 40 miles of distance. They accelerated towards the Mirages, and as Lieutenant Thomas got the first radar contact, he took the lead. The Harriers were executing a hook attack tactic. The leader attacks from the front, using the AIM-9L's all-aspect ability. while the wingman turns to a side and descends or climbs to make himself harder to spot. He then turns back into the enemy formation and attacks from the rear. As the two formations were approaching, Thomas achieved a radar lock-on and visually identified the two Mirages at about 8 nautical miles. Carlos Perona was informed by the ground control that the Harriers were 10 miles away, but his own radar showed nothing, so he performed a visual search. He finally spotted one enemy aircraft 6 miles away, above the cloud cover. He knew there had to be 2 of them, but for now, he focused on the one he saw. García Cuerva and Perona were both angling in on Thomas from their individual vectors, and their formation was now coming into a fighting wing. This was an echelon-type formation with the two Mirages about 1,200 yards apart. Both British pilots later reported being surprised by this, as the formation was considered unsuitable. If the wingman was attacked, the leader couldn't easily help him. Thomas attempted to attack one of the Mirages with his Sidewinder, but the missile seeker failed to acquire its target. Neither of the Argentine pilots saw Paul Barton, who dived away and swung to the right, maneuvering for a rear attack. He locked Perona with his radar, but then spotted the Mirages at 5 miles. The leader crossed his nose, beginning a gentle left turn. Thomas met the Mirages head-on and passed about 100 feet above the leader, and then above the wingman too. Carlos Perona attempted to gain height advantage, using the superior climb of his Mirage. But the remaining drop tank was reducing its performance, and he saw a Sea Harrier climbing to his left and slightly higher. Both aircraft entered a vertical scissors maneuver. The other Sea Harrier, flown by Paul Barton, managed to slip behind unseen. Throughout his turn, he kept the visual contact on Perona's Mirage. The maneuver slowed him down, and Perona was now much faster and well outside gun range. But Barton heard his Sidewinder growl and launched it at the Mirage. The Mirage leader, García Cuerva, saw the missile launch and warned his wingman. But it was too late. As Carlos Perona was trying to reacquire Thomas's Harrier visually, he felt a big jolt. It quickly became obvious that he would not be able to control the airplane, but he managed to point it southward in the direction of Pebble Island and eventually ejected over it. This was crucial as Perona wasn't wearing an anti-exposure suit, so landing in the cold waters of South Atlantic would have meant certain death. He was injured on touchdown and couldn't walk, but he was eventually rescued. García Cuerva realized he was now alone against 2 Sea Harriers, and he executed a hard turn spiraling into the cloud cover. This allowed Lieutenant Thomas to maneuver behind him and launch a Sidewinder on the diving Mirage. Thomas saw the missile pass its target, and then they both disappeared into the clouds. Thomas followed through the undercast to try to find evidence of a crash, but he saw nothing. He returned to Invincible and reported a possible kill. García Cuerva escaped unharmed, but his fuel state was too low to return to his base in mainland Argentina. The runway at Port Stanley Airfield was too short for regular fast jet operations, but he could still theoretically land his Mirage there and possibly even take off in clean condition. He had discussed that option with Carlos Perona after their first mission, and now he was in a position to try it. His attempt ended in a tragedy. His Mirage was misidentified by anti-aircraft gunners and shot down. It crashed in the shallow waters south of Port Stanley Airfield. Capitán García Cuerva failed to eject and was killed. Some sources say that the Mirage was damaged by the missile fired by Lieutenant Thomas. But the airframe was eventually recovered and it showed no evidence of a missile hit. The first hot engagement between the British and Argentine fighters resulted in the loss of two of the most capable Argentine types. This was part 2 of our video about the aerial battle of May the 1st over the Falkland Islands. The day was still far from over and intense action was to follow, but we will talk about that in part 3. Be sure to press the like button if you liked the video, join our Patreon supporters or donate on PayPal to keep the channel in business. Thank you and keep watching Showtime 112.